Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture. The Rogues create them every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Facebook.com/Rogue Wave podcast and Twitch.tv/Rogue Wave podcast. You can download this podcast immediately following the live stream on all major podcasting apps or go to RogueWavePodcast.com to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. I am your host, Michael Dolce. Tonight, Henry Cavill back as Superman. Snyder Cut spawns Suicide Squad Director's Cut Solo 2. And Looters hit your local comic book shop. As always, I'm joined by my co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Hassan Godwin. All jokes aside, how are you doing? Because obviously, we're both in and around New York City, but you are actually in New York City. And I know the last couple of days have been, a little crazy. 2020 just keeps giving us the middle finger, kind of deal. But how is everything? Are you, obviously you're here, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, obviously I'm not outside, so yeah. I'm still following the quarantine at the moment, so that's kept me out of trouble, I suppose.
That's the baffling part about all this too, is that the quarantine just goes out the window right now. And and look, we try to be a distraction. At least I try to, make the show, our platform is that we are a distraction from, all the crazy real life stuff, and like to talk about all the fantasy stuff that kind of entertains and makes us better. But obviously the last 3 months have just been kind of, wacky, and the last, week or so has been even greater. But I actually legitimately on Monday was thinking to myself, gee, you're right in New York City. So I know it became a very dangerous place to be, even more so than with the virus, because obviously, look, as much as you want to quarantine, you do have to actually step outside your building at some point to get food or supplies, and obviously that wasn't happening. So
it wasn't happening after a certain certain hour.
Yeah,
but I mean, if you go out before then, it's not that bad.
Okay.
Where I am, it's not it's not an immediate situation. Let's just
okay.
say.
No, that's good. I mean, I just wanted to make sure, we joke. We go back and forth, but we obviously we're friends and we care, so we want to make sure, it's good. So that was our moment of the day, our solemn moment of the day. Why don't we talk a little more fun and exciting things instead, and we'll shift to this. This is our all the rage in the pop culture world. This is our segment called Rogue Rage. It started actually before all the craziness, or the new craziness, I should say. Last week, Variety reported that Henry Cavill is in talks to return as Superman in an upcoming DC movie. And they wrote, Henry Cavill isn't hanging up his Superman cape just yet. Sources confirm to Variety that he's in talks to return as Clark Kent in an upcoming DC movie. In addition to Zack Snyder's Superman origin story, Man of Steel, he also played the iconic hero in Batman v Superman and the Justice League. With the announcement of the long-rumored Snyder Cut for HBO Max, insiders tell Variety Cavill wouldn't be suiting up for the director's cut, but rather a cameo in one of DC's upcoming films, including Aquaman 2, the Suicide Squad sequel, and The Batman. In a Men's Health December cover story, Cavill revealed he had not given up the role. The cape is still in the closet. It's still mine, but I'm going to sit quietly in the dark as all the stuff is going on. I've not given up the role. There's a lot I have to give for Superman yet. Your thoughts on the idea, the possibility of Henry Cavill returning to Superman?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good thing.
Do we need more Henry Cavill as Superman? Do we want it?
We don't need any of them. But he was, as pertains to the role of Superman and the look and feel of Superman, he's probably he's probably best suited for that. He's probably the best they're going to find for that. I mean, he just genuinely looks. Also, he hadn't done much. He's done movies prior to being Superman, but he was unknown enough so that he could be primarily looked at as Superman for most people. As when that broke the mainstream. I mean, he made Immortals before that and a couple of other movies. So he's recognizable to people for that, but I mean, he really, he was kind of almost in the Christopher Reeves milieu in the sense that nobody had known who Christopher Reeve was, so they accept him much quicker as Superman, as the iconic Superman. I liked him as Superman. I liked some of Snyder's takes on the Superman legend. I know it's controversial. I'm not talking about some of the more controversial stuff like snapping people's necks and, not saving lives from,
which we talked about last
9/11 event kind of circumstances. But I think if the DCEU has any hopes of consolidating their universe into something as substantial. I don't know if it's necessarily smart for the DCEU to try to copy the MCU exactly. But if they're going to try to build anything resembling what the MCU has built, they're going to need consistency in some of their movies, and that basically starts with the actors.
Well, consistency.
We've already lost Batman.
Yeah, consistency is a good word because, as it turns out, Henry Cavill may not be suiting up. So, according to Hollywood Reporter, this came out, I think, the day after. Henry Cavill and Superman is complicated. Sources tell Heat Vision, that's Hollywood Reporter's comic book-centric reporting. They are not in any negotiations for cameos. The character's not in any written script, and not in Black Adam, not the Batman, not even the Flash, which would be the most obvious project to insert the Kryptonian, seeing as the film deals with both time travel and an alternate Earth, and could serve as an easy entry point. The key word in all this is currently. There is, however, interest about having exploratory talks. So, I would sit there and tell you, I don't think we've seen the full potential.
DC doesn't deserve anything. Warner Brothers, DC, they don't deserve any of the. You don't hear any of this nonsense from MCU.
Right.
None of this nonsense. None of this back and forth nonsense.
Right.
Because MCU is using a new. They've created a new system of the way they do things, a new way of doing things, and the DCU is trying to use the old ways. And basically, like it or love it, or hate it, the old ways doesn't exist anymore. The Marvel movies, Disney or whatever came in and just kind of abolished the old way of blockbuster movie making, right? For better or worse, and probably not forever, but for right now, that's the way they've done things. And they've got a system of being able to streamline what you could arguably call excellence, if you're just looking at the results of and how they weather mistakes, like how they weather movies like Thor 2 and Voltron, and some movies that people now are starting to say were not there, they were not at their standard, their quality standards.
Right. Comparatively speaking, unless you're Pat Shand, Age of Ultron was not as good as every other.
And they just shake that off. They don't, they don't suffer. So Ant-Man, the two Ant-Man movies are hits. They're not the giant money makers that say Avengers is,
right?
Or Black Panther or whatever. But they, the way they've arranged things, or the way they have their universe arranged, it can weather smaller films along with the larger films, right? So that they can make them all profitable and all viable, and then and no matter what, they keep doubling down on it. They just, we're getting another Ant-Man movie. Sorry, guys. We're getting another Doctor Strange movie. We're getting another, and I don't mean that as a negative.
Right.
And they just manage to do it. The universe seems to, and I know it's a business. I absolutely know it's a business, but the universe seems to come first, right? They are able to keep giving us the impression that the universe and the art comes first, even though we know for a fact that the business of business is business. But okay, so the DCEU has had success. Man of Steel was a success. It wasn't $1 billion movie, but it was a success.
Right.
Batman versus Superman.
Suicide Squad could actually be considered more of a success, though.
Suicide Squad was a success. Batman
because
versus Superman
it was less expectations.
Was a success. Money making wise, it wasn't a hit. It wasn't a giant. It wasn't a monster, and there was more wrong with it than there was good with it. But I mean, they didn't take a bath on it, right? Justice League was a success, in the sense that it didn't cripple them, in their attempts or whatever they were making. And then you got Wonder Woman, and then you've got Aquaman. So you've got these movies that you can now build things off of. And now you're getting the Snyder cut.
Was that the order? I thought Wonder Woman came out before Justice League.
I'm talking about success, not
No. What I'm saying
chronological order.
No, I'm asking about chronological order because I wonder if the success of Wonder Woman buoyed the critical panning. And I know you're saying commercial success, but Justice League itself was not.
But that doesn't matter what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is basically the fact that they don't know how to manage. They don't know. They have not had failure, in the sense of Solo. They haven't had a situation like that where they put so much money into it and they got no money out of it, right? And then the people are still talking about their movies. Things are still happening. The one thing that the MCU has managed to do consistently is keep a consistent roster.
Yeah.
The guy who's playing Iron Man is going to be the guy who plays Iron Man through all the movies where Iron Man is featured.
Yeah.
The guy who plays Captain America is going to be the guy who plays Captain America for all the movies that Captain America is featured. And that
I know it's not
a level of consistency that makes that comforts the audience and allows the audience to accept the veneer that these people are actually these characters. These characters have been given life.
Right. I know it's not connected, and it's not really a story that we're going to cover. But I was just reading on Twitter last night too that they're like abolishing Batwoman, like the actual character from the series. All together. So it's just funny you mentioned consistency, and you're going to have a new Batwoman, but at least the character is going to be different. So there's a reconciliation versus saying like, "Oh, she's playing."
I don't understand that. Like the character, they're recasting the role, right?
Yes, they're recasting the role, and according to what was on Twitter, and take that for a grain of salt, it's not the same character playing Batwoman. It's a new Batwoman. So at least they're not doing what you said. And maybe that's a good or bad thing. I couldn't tell you, but they're not actually, it's not like you're sitting there going like, well, that wasn't the Batwoman we saw last year, but why does she say that? There's.
But I mean, look, if the star decides to leave, that's a different story. You can't make that happen. But if it's a matter of the star saying, look, I'll continue, and then 5 minutes later undercutting him by saying, well, it's open for debate, we'll figure it out, then you're undermining your own universe. You're doing that to yourself. That's not anybody else doing that to you. That's you doing that to yourself. That's you shooting yourself in the foot. And so, look, I don't know if their goal is to be the DC's version of the MCU. I don't know if that's what they want, but they're definitely not achieving it. This is definitely not the way to achieve it.
Right. Well, speaking of which, more Snyder Cut news as well, too. And so it's funny, after we aired last week, there was a couple people kind of privately messaged me, and they were like, Snyder Cut's done. It's not going to cost them anything. And I think going back and forth, we were kind of wondering whether it would.
No.
The Snyder Cut does not exist, according to Bob Greenblatt, who's the Warner Media chairman. He told Recode Media podcast, Zach is actually building it, and it's complex, including new VFX shots. It's a radical rethinking of the movie, and it's complicated and wildly expensive. I'll just say I wish it was just $30 million and stop there.
And that's stupid also. That comment is stupid. Even if he's upset about that, it doesn't matter. If it's a ruse, it's a stupid ruse.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the whole reason, we all know the reason this is happening is because there's no content and everybody wants to launch a stream, right?
Right.
So you need concept. You need content. Everybody's, or I don't know if everyone's clamoring for the Snyder Cut, but there's a loud enough call for it that it seems like a viable product.
Right.
HBO Max wants to get off the ground.
Right.
This is a good way for them to do it. And then again, listen, you want it done to a level where people watch it for all 4 weeks or all 6 weeks or however many times they break it down. You're going to have to bring it up to snuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're going to spend that much on a new show anyway, right? Yeah. So why complain about that openly?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's funny.
I don't understand that.
It's funny you mentioned that, the need for content. The Snyder Cut, we kind of touched on it last week, and how it kind of sets a bad precedent, or it sets a precedent. Maybe not a bad one. We debated whether it was good or bad, and it's subjective, so maybe it's not. But it definitely does set a precedent. So now all of a sudden fans, and we didn't talk about it last week, but it's already started rumbling last week, was the Ayers cut for Suicide Squad. Now, this one's an interesting one. So he went on Twitter recently, and he said Suicide Squad director David Ayer, is it Ayer? Whatever. We're not professional. Says, terrifying Joker scenes with incredible acting were cut. Suicide Squad was reshot because the tone was too dark, the director added. It was reshot. My first act was a normally constructed film. I took my inspiration from Nolan. There were real scenes with incredible acting between Jared, which is Jared Leto, who played Joker very, 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 very briefly, and Harley Quinn, actress Margot Robbie. Joker was terrifying. Harley was complex. Expanding further, he revealed the change in tone from trailers to the lighter, more joke-filled finished product was a result of both the critical whiplash to Batman v Superman. So anybody out there, we got a YouTube comment, by the way, or we got a comment, I should say, from someone that was like, oh, you'll blame Snyder if this is bad because that's just the easy thing to do. And it's like, no. Batman v Superman wasn't good. Like, it was not a good finished product, and it really did radically alter everything. So David Ayer, is actually saying, we were told to fix this movie because of Batman v Superman and the success of Deadpool. The first Suicide Squad trailer nailed the tone and intention of the film. Methodical, layered, complex, beautiful, and sad. After BVS reviews shell-shocked the leadership at the time, the success of Deadpool, my soulful drama was beaten into a comedy. And I found a bunch of articles as well too, saying, we'd actually like to see it. Now, according to David Ayer, the cut's there, so it's not something that they'd have to really go and there's no reshoots. This is an instance I would love for them to release this cut, and I'll tell you why. A, if it's already done, not going to cost them anything. So from a financial standpoint, not that it matters to us, it's a no-lose venture, right? Throw it up on streaming, throw it up on HBO Max. That I would pay HBO Max for, because I want to see what a layered, complex, thoughtful story is to this director versus what he actually puts up there. Because a lot of times you sit there, there are so many times, I've quit, like when bands do interviews and they're like, we really went back to our roots and made a record that we could really be proud of, and we really got inspired this time, and you pop it in, you're like, nah, still not as good as what their old stuff was, and I've stopped looking at I've stopped reading the sound bites from directors who are going to direct films that I might want to see in terms that are adapted off of our favorite comics. Like, I've stopped kind of like, because they always go up there, they're like, man, we really made this character deep, they made this complex. And then you actually go and watch it. You're like, that's your, like, really, it was like literally one sentence in one scene in a 3-hour bloated CGI mess of a movie. That was like, but those are the ones where you go and you're like, this is not like that typical superhero movie we've got. So I want to see it. I want to see this. I want to see this so much more than the Snyder Cut, just based on those comments. I want to see Jared Leto as Joker, just based on those comments. It was amazing acting. Now, Margot Robbie and Jared Leto are fantastic actors and actresses. So maybe I'll put my foot in my mouth and be like, man, this guy really was, he was really shafted. But then we'll get justice by seeing it. I mean, I don't know. Snyder Cut, Suicide Squad cut. Which one you want to see more? Pit him against it, because I'm going Suicide Squad all day long with this.
I'm going Snyder Cut. I want to see a good I don't look. I'm not a. I am not a. I am not a giant Josh Whedon fan.
Josh Whedon, by the way, is an insurance
awesome.
agent in
Josh Whedon
in Jersey,
is amazing.
And he gets so pissed. He gets so pissed.
But he's an amazing insurance agent, and he doesn't deserve it.
He's a little too quippy for me.
Yeah. But Joss Whedon, I'm not a huge fan of his writing.
Yeah.
I'm not. I've never been a fan of the. There's a they call them Whedonisms, but what is it? What's the actual term for it? Well, whatever it is, it's not something I'm a fan of.
Yeah. Whedonisms is pretty accurate.
But there's actual
Justice League to me though, because it was such a butchered conglomeration. I feel I have a hard time saying that's a Joss Whedon film. Now, look, you could sit there and look at.
It's not. That's not even what I'm talking about. But the Whedonisms are blatant.
Yeah, oh sure.
You could tell where the Snyder gets off and the Whedon starts.
Boobs.
No,
Boobs. That's a Whedon.
Yeah.
No, that was all Whedon with Flash on top of Wonder Woman. Boobs.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm not a huge fan of his. I'd like to see Snyder's original.
Is it Snyder or Schneider? Because Zack Schneider is a wonderful lawyer who does corporate lease law. Very nice guy. I met him. He's a very nice guy. Snyder.
Anyway,
what do you think of David Ayers' comments? Are you at all curious about seeing Jared Leto?
No.
Fully, I have to be at this point. I mean, why not? We have 18 Jokers.
I saw Suicide Squad. I don't care about an extended cut of Suicide Squad, which is basically what that'll just be. It'll be a director's cut.
You think so? You think do you think that basically my interpretation of his layered, methodical, really good film is what it would be the antithesis of what we actually see on
screen? I don't want to doubt him if he thinks. I mean, artists are bad judges of whatever their art is.
Yeah.
So if he says it's more meaningful or whatever, he could be right, but then he could be completely delusional about what he thinks. What he thinks is good versus what turns out to be bad.
Right.
So I mean, anybody who says, if he says, look, the true meaning of what I was trying to do was cut from the film, then he's probably telling the truth. He knows what's cut.
Yeah.
Whether or not that will be emotionally effective is a completely different story. It's not up to him, right? But he knows if the essence of what he was trying to do was taken away from it,
Right.
So I'm not disputing that. I have no right to dispute whether he's right or not. I'm just not really that interested in the film in and of itself. I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not. I've seen Suicide Squad. I didn't think that should have been one of the properties that DC rolled out in the beginning. Like, why would you roll out if you're trying to build a Super Friends, right, or Justice League or Super Friends, kind of universe to coincide with the MCU? Why would one of your first movies be a super team of villains? And the villains, they're side villains to superheroes that you haven't depicted. So 90% of the character value of all these, or the value of all these characters, but the character value of all these characters, I did mean that correctly, is that they are villains, and now they're in a superhero circumstance. They're being weaponized. They're being utilized for a superhero, for a heroic utility, in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
And so you would need the juxtaposition of each of them as a villain in perhaps a property, so that you could get the nuance of the fact that they are now in the superhero roles.
Yeah.
But if you just start with them, and frankly, the only really mainstream ones that we knew, that non-comic book fans knew, are Joker and Harley Quinn. And Harley Quinn only because maybe the animated series, maybe a lot of fans of the animated series would know exactly who she is. So it didn't make any sense,
So I found an article from CBR.
Before you successfully get Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and and Flash and Cyborg and Aquaman, before you establish them, before you get them off the ground, you go right for, after 2 movies in, you go right for Suicide Squad. It's nonsense.
Well, it's funny. So this article from CBR actually had a really interesting perspective. You can't help but wonder if Ayers' version was better. One thing is certain, the Ayer cut is out there because multiple people have seen it. Thus, unlike the Snyder cut, there's no debate about its existence, which, obviously that is still
no
in
more
flux.
Debate anymore.
Well, there's a debate as to what the finished product we're going to see is what
of course, but I mean, there's no debate as to whether or not
we're going to see
there is a Snyder cut.
Yes, there will be, yes, no matter what. It might not have fixed Joker's controversial damaged tattoo or Enchantress's hula-inspired villainy, but it's entirely possible it made more sense and tied up all the loose ends. However, unlike Justice League, Suicide Squad overperformed at the box office, raking in $746 million, even winning an Oscar. This means that Warner Brothers considers this case closed and has no incentive to revisit it.
That's another thing. Why would you do that if you already had a hit? I guess you have a personal vision. You want your vision to get out, but it seems like you trying to get another bite of the apple. You're trying to ride the Zack Snyder coattails.
I mean, at this point, why wouldn't you? I mean, you made a great point, though. I mean, it's such a lack of content now. Although there are reports, and again, covered that filming is starting up on all this stuff, but still,
I'm just answering your question as to which one I would rather watch.
Yeah,
I'm not debating whether or not it's necessary or is useful.
No, I understand. Yeah, I know from a business point of view. All right, all this Snyder cut traction where the fans actually got what they want. Again, whether it's a good precedent or bad precedent, has set a precedent, and now everyone wants what they want. And here's one that I think we both can agree on. Make Solo 2 happen. Fan campaign demands Star Wars sequel. It's a banner month for fan campaigns making their movie dreams come true. While DC fans are eventually getting the Snyder cut and hoping for the Ayers cut, fans of Solo, A Star Wars Story are clamoring to hashtag Make Solo 2 happen, and they're picking up some steam. Fans took to Twitter Memorial Day weekend to share their hopes for a sequel to the Han Solo origin story, pining for the return of cast members Emilia Clarke, Darth Maul, and Donald Glover's Lando Calrissian. I can get behind this. Solo is an enjoyable experience. It got shafted by bad timing. It got shafted by a controversial movie before it. It was a really nice entry in the Star Wars universe. And
I think it also takes a hit because of you just murdered Harrison Ford's Han Solo.
Yeah.
And then now you're trying to, you're trying to give us a substitute.
Yeah.
I don't tend to like the criticism that it's a movie no one asked for, because actually no one asked for Endgame either. No one asked for yeah. But I'm using certain movies as specifically, especially successful movies. Nobody asked for Infinity War,
Right.
But we're happy we got it, So if it works, it doesn't matter that no one asked for it.
Right.
It's a criticism people use when something doesn't work.
Right.
And nobody asked for any movie, so that's a BS critique. Although I have heard it used for Solo a couple of times. It's also a movie that didn't need to happen, and that's another bad critique because pretty much every movie does not need to happen. However, it's a delightful movie. Mm-hmm. It's fun. It's I remember years ago we were going over it because we just saw the trailer at the Super Bowl.
Right.
It was after this was right after the Last Jedi.
Right.
And you said it looked fun, and I laughed at you, and I was like, "Oh, you're just going to forgive them? You're forgiving them for the crime of the Last Jedi? How dare you?" And then I did go to see it, and I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I gotta admit, I'm enjoying this. I think of all the Marvel, of all the Disney, but I was right because it is Marvel, because Disney is Marvel. I think of all the Disney Star Wars movies.
I will allow that.
Yeah, thanks. it's my favorite. It's the one I enjoy watching the most. I think the best one that they've made is Rogue One.
I was going to say, actually, Well, you know what's funny? Rogue One, as much as I
Solo
enjoyed
is
it,
the one I enjoy watching the most. It's
Right.
it's the one that leaves the least. It's the one with the least baggage, even though it's the baggage of the murdered Harrison Ford over the younger model.
Yeah, but I don't want to see old Harrison Ford in anything. I want to see young Indiana Jones. I want to see. Young
I'm not
Han
co-signing
Solo.
that, but anyway,
that's
basically
unless Harrison Ford is playing the Sean Connery role. Indiana Jones.
Not co-signing. Not co-signing. Anyway,
maybe
which is good for you. That's up to you. That's fine if that's how you feel. But basically, what I'm saying is that it hit a spot.
Yeah,
it was fun and it hit a spot.
You are the Star Wars nerd. I am the Star Wars geek. So I didn't get into the animated series. I didn't get into Star Wars Rebels or anything like that. So Clone Wars, having Darth Maul be up on screen and actually have a character versus what he was in the prequels in Episode 1, which was basically just a really cool lightsaber wielding Sith warrior. That intrigues me. And that little cameo at the end really intrigued me. And I was like, this is actually pretty cool. Even I, though, at the time, and this is nothing to do with the movie, I was Star Wars out at that point. Like I really was. I remember in the movie theater going like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like you have that fatigue of just having been bombarded with too much Star Wars at this point. And again, no fault of the movie because I actually really enjoyed it. So
would you appreciate like if they re-release Solo as a complete director's cut? And on Disney Plus as a 6-episode season with a promise of another season, I think that would be much better received than if it had come out as a movie.
Yeah, I agree.
If that was a TV show, if the exact same thing we saw was a television show,
100%. And look, in the 5 years we've been doing this podcast together, it's actually 4. I have. You and I only 3.
Oh, it was 10. Feels like 10.
I have never agreed with you more. I think that's absolutely 100% correct. If they did a Solo TV series, a Disney Plus told, and look, Disney Plus.
Imagine a full episode of the train heist. A full episode of that. A full episode of Nimbam with a Solo in the World War
why
I
not? Instead of Solo
circumstance.
2, why not? I mean, look, TV is not getting big celebrities for TV shows is not a hard thing to do, and it's not like you then would have to necessarily. If you can't get Emilia Clarke for the next season, it's okay. It's okay. You can have a season without her in it. Or
she started on television, though.
I'm just saying if you couldn't. I'm just using her as an example. Donald Glover. If you couldn't get Donald
Glover's
Glover
on television. Like they're all television stars, with the exception of Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson was the biggest star of the film.
You're saying. I'm merely
and
saying,
Paul Bettany.
I'm merely saying for scheduling purposes or for whatever the case is.
They'll work it out. What are they doing now?
You could lock in
Olin Emmerich.
As long as you could lock in Chewie. Chewie's not going anywhere.
That guy made out like a bandit with all these movies.
Met that guy in Philadelphia, the guy who is underneath the costume now. Very nice.
The extremely large,
very tall
Scandinavian man.
Very Scandinavian as well.
He's very Scandinavian.
Absolutely.
He's a Viking. They got a Viking to play Chewbacca. They should have made Chewbacca blonde.
Last question for you, and it's a really serious question. There are even talks of a Revenge of the Sith director's cut. Would you be on board for that?
I would be on board for it, but I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. George Lucas is notoriously.
Yeah. Well, no, he sold everything now at this point, didn't he?
But there's I think there's caveats to whether or not certain things can be done. Because for the cash, Disney would have totally Blu-rayed out all the theatrical cuts of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
To pimp those out, especially in the darker times, the Last Jedi era where right after Solo tanked at the box office, where it was like, oh, Disney Star Wars is over, before The Mandalorian, right after Solo, and that kind of bleak period where everybody was, certain that they had Disney on the ropes,
right?
That they were going to go down. That would have been the perfect time for them to re-release the original trilogy on Blu-rays,
Yeah.
And they didn't do. I mean, the theatrical cuts of the original trilogy, the non-special edition cuts of the original trilogy, and they did not do it. You know, they did not capitulate to that. I think, and I do not know. Mm-hmm. I think now originally there was a problem with licensing, especially with A New Hope with Fox. Now Disney solved that problem by eating Fox alive.
Like they literally feasted on a Fox.
Yeah, they did.
It was a barbecue.
And ate the X-Men. And well, none of us were. But I don't know.
I saw an article and it's more comic centric. We might do it next week. We'll do it next week. It's an X-Men thing. It was kind of cool. We're trying to be creative here. So we're doing different things. All right, coming up next, we'll go spinning the racks. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast, talking comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday night. Go to roguewavepodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast. Now, in the middle of all the craziness and the middle finger that is 2020, I, on the other hand, have had something kind of cool that I've been doing. And again, we use this as a distraction from the world out there. I actually went in and reorganized all my old comics that I made when I was in 6th grade. And Hassan, I got to tell you, first of all, I did over 100 issues, which is very, very prolific. It's much more prolific than I, as a comic book creator, than I am right now. And I reread an issue that I did, okay, for a 7th grader. So it's like from 6th grade all the way through college. I did all these little mini books. One of the best comics I've ever read was from my 7th grade self. I actually remember closing going, that was a darn good issue. Now, it might have been a copy of X-Force number 7, written by Fabian Nicieza, friend of the show. But I read it. I go, man, 12-year-old me. Look at me go. Mind you, I also read a couple issues where I was just like, boy, I don't know what I was doing. But when I got to the end, and this is how much of a mogul, as you said it off air, that I wanted to be. I had faithful readers. I had friends. I would pass it out to friends, and they would read it. So they were my faithful readers. At the end of one particular issue that I wrote and drew, it said, "This wasn't very good, faithful readers. I really apologize." And I remember reading, going, "This wasn't very good." And I go, "Oh, I knew it was. I knew it wasn't good. I knew it wasn't good." Why am I doing all this? We're gearing up for a new Sire trade, Kickstarter coming out in summertime, and I actually wanted to refresh my long-standing memory of the comics I created as a kid, because I got to tell you, there's so much in here that like 12-year-old me created that I can mine for like future stories, and I always had kind of intended to do so, kind of like an ultimate reimagining of it. But I don't know, it was pretty cool. Did you ever create comics as a kid? Were you a comic book? Did you fold 2 pieces of paper together, being an artist extraordinaire like you are?
No,
you never did. See, my art was not very good.
No comment.
Oh, you did. So you did. You're lying.
No comment. No, I'm not. There's no comment. I'm not. I admit to nothing. I admit to. You know what? What kind of moron takes a piece of paper and folds it in half and then tries to staple it in the middle and then realizes that the two ends are too steep, so you have to bend it 3 times in order to put a staple in the middle, because that's how comic books are done. Yeah. And then you realize that now you've just ruined you've ruined the package that you just tried to put together. You've ruined the template that you were using. Yeah. Also, I have never, I can honestly say, put a bunch of pieces of paper together, folded them in half, finally managed to staple them correctly, then started drawing inside just to realize I run out of pages before I could finish my story. That's never happened to me.
Oh, man.
Never happened.
That's why happened. When I was a kid, I had an incredible sense of all this stuff, and I'm not just saying because it was me, but I really did, because every issue, for the most part, would kind of end on time. There was a couple times I could sit there and I'm like, I realized I was running out of pages and had to wrap this up, but I was at least able to do that. For your stapling question, yeah, no. You want to see this? This is vintage copying Rob Liefeld, by the way.
That's a recipe for success right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Copy Liefeld.
That Wildfire only lasted one issue, by the way. So
yes,
anything where I was blatantly copying didn't last very long. All right, so stay tuned. There'll be a Sire trade coming later in the year. We'll do a Kickstarter for that.
It'll be a compilation of all those old books that you just did, right? It's going to be a. You know what? I bet you launched a Kickstarter of all your old comic books. I bet you would actually turn a pretty tidy profit.
Well, yeah, because the work's already done. I already did the work. The work's done.
There's no clamor for content.
Yeah. There's 125 issues that I did.
But I bet you. No, I'm just serious. I think there's people out there who would spend, would happily send you like $20 to get a trade paperback of all your old.
Scan all that stuff in.
Yeah. You should just try it as an experiment.
I might. I just might. We'll see. All right. We are incredible fanboys of all things comic books, which is why I brought that up. I thought that was kind of cool. Again, I realized that I'm showing you on camera the Rob Liefeld knockoff that I did. And, if you're listening on the podcast, you can't actually see it, but that's okay. Just trust me. This is some vintage Rob Liefeld knockoff. Just that particular issue.
Just trust us. It's good stuff. Just go with it.
Every week, we like to bring you the inside info and the source material that will make its way onto the large and small screen. We call this segment Spinning the Racks.
Spin the rack, spin that rack.
Comic book stores hit by looting across the U.S. This is from Bleeding Cool. This was posted on June 1st. I think there's a few more that have been hit since then. 8 comic book stores have reported looting over the last few nights as a result of widespread protests against racist police actions and violence. There may be more, but these are the ones that which have taken their experiences public. Golden Apple. I don't know if you've ever been to Golden Apple. It's one of the best stores I've ever been to. It's in L.A. I went there with a friend of the show, Marcus Perry. Really great store. They wrote a statement. After some peaceful protests and destruction, eventually the angry mob moved onto Melrose Shopping District and ended up not only burning down the old shop location, but attempting to loot the current store. Thankfully, they weren't able to penetrate security gates to get any product, but left a trail of damage at Golden Apple, and neighboring shops. They're doing a GoFundMe, and I think the GoFundMe... Oh, the shop was planning to reopen this Monday after being closed for the past 2 months due to COVID-19. Now their plans and timelines have changed. Heidi High Comics in Los Angeles also got hit. Graham Crackers in Chicago, that's a great store also. And that suffered similarly. Unfortunately, our downtown Chicago Loop location got broken into. For the time being, we are closed. We will not be open for sales as we deal with the problem. We're hoping to open again tomorrow. So it's good to see that they're at least, again, some stores aren't even open yet. I know in New York, my local shop is still doing curbside just because of the restrictions put in. Top Cut Comics in, where is this one? In Chicago. Now they said they're closed for business until further notice. So, hopefully, It sucks, and it's something that I just thought I don't understand, how that helps anything in terms of spreading a message. It seemed to me, especially a comic book store. I think somebody, once said to me online, well, maybe they're trying to get to Marvel and DC. It's like local store owner has nothing to do with that, nothing to do with that. So hopefully it doesn't impact us and impact stores from reopening, because titles were starting to be, stores were starting to reopen, and hopefully, they can continue to do so. And like I said, 2020 has been a middle finger. I don't know. Anything to add to that?
No.
Yeah.
Not really.
All right, Marvel switches 8 April comics from print to digital, including 2 selling over 20,000. Now, that was an interesting... This is from ICV2. It will release 8 comic titles previously solicited as print, with no plans to release the content as individual comic issues in the future. Instead, the comics will end up in print collections later this year. They include Ant-Man, Avengers of the Wasteland, Ironheart #1, Hawkeye, Freefall. The titles being moved to digital were selling in a fairly wide range, and with the March issues of the 2 bestsellers in the group selling over 20,000 copies. So Ant-Man #3 actually sold 10,000 copies before it was actually moved to digital only. I think we're going to see more of this going forward, though. I think the death of the single issue is slowly upon us in terms of what we're going to... I know. It's just the problem is retailers can't stay open if they don't sell single issues. That seems to be the argument, right? What?
The medium has to evolve, right? For the demands of the day. So the people who are selling the medium can't dictate the evolution of the medium because it'll hurt their sales.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. How does that make sense?
I know. It's I think one of those things where it's been struggling already, and
it's not like they're doing it's not like the retailers are doing great in and of itself. So the retailers are trying to strangle the life out of the thing that they're selling because they don't know how to innovate new ways to sell.
Yeah.
It's cold to say because I wouldn't know how to innovate either, in this circumstance. But if you love the medium, you want to see it evolve. The comic book industry in and of itself kind of deserves to die because it refuses to grow. It refuses to expand. It refuses to do anything. And in the vacuum of good ideas of how to grow, of how to expand itself, in a vacuum of of having genuine think tanks of actual creators and the geniuses that make most of these books, who are willing to just kind of bend the envelope a little bit and try to see what they can come up with that will stimulate new sales and new interest in their products. They keep doubling down on the old ways, and it leaves the door open for these these newbies to come in and with their with these ideas that are not well received, and I will not comment on them on who they are. There's some of the stuff is rather notorious, and kind of considerably could be considered to be very tone deaf and ill conceived, well-meaning but poorly executed or whatever. And you're getting that because there's a glut of new blood in the mix because of a dearth of any new ideas coming from the veterans. And now we're talking about limitations on the expansion or the evolution of the medium because of the retailers or the people who sell it.
Yeah, I know.
And what sense does that make? That doesn't make any sense either. Like, no, I can only sell fruit. I can only sell loose fruit. So it should always come like this. Well, you should buy in bulk. You should buy by the bushel. You can, there's better quality control. There are better selections. There's better variety that way. Well, no, it should be sold. It should be sold scattered and sporadically so that I can be able to sell it. It's like, okay, yeah, but that's not how the market is moving. So
it's one of those things where you just sit there and and we've kind of said this on previous podcasts. You just know it's one of those movies you kind of already know the ending to. But you're just painfully watching it go down.
Yeah,
anyway.
and I get it, man, and I understand it, and we're on the other side of it. We're the creators, right? We're constantly looking for new ways to try to innovate and try to stimulate sales, but we're still basically using the same models because we're not. Nobody challenges the model. Nobody is brave enough to try to challenge the model. And look, the first, like the saying goes, the first man through the door gets bloody.
Sure.
Right? Anybody who tries to innovate is going to get destroyed by the industry for having the nerve to try to innovate. But this industry is going to have to do something. You know,
Right.
It's going to have to grow because we just had 3 or 4 months of no comic books at all, and the world did not explode. Well, it did, but not because of that.
Not because of that.
Yeah, not because of that. But I mean, the world. I mean, nothing came apart. In fact, we with the complete lack of comic books, we're getting other things like the Snyder Cut and
But
and,
you know, we're not
all this
even
other
getting
stuff.
that. It's not even until 2021.
I'm just talking about like people are entertaining all kinds of stuff. This is a time where people are because
I know.
people are trying to
This would be a
launch new
great
enterprises
time.
and new platforms. This is a
Well, this is why Kickstarter is doing so well right now. Kickstarter is
content.
blowing
This
up.
is the
No, Kickstarter
Okay.
is blowing up with this stuff because of exactly your point, though. It's people looking for this content, and it could be a great time.
and the industry apparently wants to be left behind again. You know,
Yeah.
I don't understand it. After the Diamond debacle,
Yeah,
the industry should be innovating 100,000 new ways to get their product out without having to worry about one company deciding we are not making comic books anymore.
right.
Because Diamond could just one day decide we're just not going to make comic books anymore. It's not in our bottom line. It doesn't help
Right.
our revenue stream, right? Because
Mhm.
comics aren't the sellers that they were in the 80s and the 90s, right?
Right.
So if they ever decide, well, you know what, this just and then you could totally see a cold corporate decision like that. I know there's a full industry that depends on us and our work or whatever, but you know we've just decided it's not in our best interest to keep printing comic books, and so therefore effective, effective August 1st, we're going to stop making comic books. We're going to stop printing them. Please seek help elsewhere. You know,
Yeah.
and where would the industry be? I mean, when has the industry innovated in the 3 months of the panic of no comic books? What ideas? How many ideas? We've had 1 or 2 ideas, mostly from DC, about what we're going to do about this particular situation. But where is the collective bargaining that goes together from the entire industry pulling together to decide exactly what they're going to do about a mainstream of their delivery system of their product to the people?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody has done a thing. So don't you think it kind of deserves to fall apart?
No, look, that's a little cruel to say that. I think that people
It's adapt or die, man. That's the saying, right? That's the thing everybody says, right? That's the line everybody hands everybody who complains about things that the status quo is not doing anything.
It's true. But I think there's also a nostalgic factor of, wanting something.
F nostalgia, man. Nostalgia doesn't feed anybody. Nostalgia gets us into trouble on so many things.
On that
nostalgia.
Note,
all right.
On that note, I found this article. I teased it in the first segment, and I decided to run with it anyway because I think it's a fun little argument to have. First of all, by the way, did you know Newsarama.com is no longer Newsarama.com? It is now GamesRadar.com/Newsarama. That's a whole other thing. We'll have to bring our friend Chris Arendt on to talk about that, which hopefully will not get him fired. But it's interesting. It has now become a sub-site on a video game website because I guess people want to read about video games more than anything else in there. But on that, when I found out...
You mean they found out where the money was and they innovated and decided to make the... interesting.
Correct. Well, actually, they got bought. The Games Radar...
That's still finding out where the money is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So when I found this out, I ended up saying, okay, let me go on to this new Newsarama. And lo and behold, what's there? First of all, it's a lot of top 10 lists. So poor Chris. 10 best X-Men teams of all time. Thought this was kind of fun. It goes through every single iteration of the X-Men. And the reason I thought it was really kind of fun, too, is when I went through all my old comics, a lot of my super teams that I had formed were kind of based off of whatever the X-Men team at the time was. So their list is New Mutants, number 10. Tell me if you agree or disagree with any of this. 9, Excalibur, the original one, formed back in the Chris Claremont, Alan Davis Excalibur run. New X-Men, that's the Grant Morrison, what's his face run that was so good. Frank Quitely. New X-Men was Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely. His run with his version of New X-Men. Magneto's X-Men is number 7. That was in the 80s when Magneto was actually was replaced as headmaster because Charles Xavier wanted to stay out in space. X-Factor version 2.0. Now let me stop you right here. This is the government-sponsored and approved all-new, all-different X-Factor, led by Havoc
and Polaris and Guido. And yeah,
This is one of my favorite runs of X books I've ever read, it was such a short run too. Peter David was the
wasn't
writer.
Larry Stroman who is
Larry Stroman art. Yep,
yeah.
Larry Stroman. Peter David was the writer on this. It was with Multiple Man. He actually made Multiple Man interesting, which is ironic because then Multiple Man ended up becoming like he ended up spawning all these other comic book series after that. This is one of my favorite runs. Like I could literally read, and I in rereading my own books, I created an X Factor 2.0 knockoff just because of how good that run was. But that was number 6 on the list. Number 5, the Outback Team. This is right when I started really kind of like digging back into the back issues of X-Men. It wasn't like I jumped on with X-Men number 1 like right around that time because that was just the time I was into comics.
This was after Fall of the Mutants when they were all dead, right?
Yeah. But the Siege Perilous, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty cool, that kind of stuff. The First Class, which is, they refer to the original Jack Kirby lineup as the First Class, and I actually disagree with them.
And they're number what?
They're number 4.
Number 4.
As the original, as the best X-Men team.
Who became X Factor.
Who became X Factor, I know. Astonishing X-Men, the Joss Whedon run with Kitty Pryde.
That's before the original. They put that before the original.
Yes.
Okay.
I actually agree. I think the original X-Men were so bad that they ended up having to cancel the original X-Men.
If you didn't have the original X-Men, you wouldn't have any X-Men.
I get it.
You know?
That doesn't make them the best one.
They shouldn't be on the list, is what I'm saying. They shouldn't be a point of ranking because you have to have the first. The first you have to have a foundation.
Right.
Well,
all right. Let me continue and let me see what you think about this. The Blue and Gold iteration, which I'm also rereading right now. I have a trade paperback from.
I agree that's better than the Joss Whedon era. Holy crap!
Yeah. How do you solve a problem like having too many mutants? You split them up. That's what Chris Claremont and Jim Lee did before they forced Chris Claremont off. That wasn't written in the article, but I'm just using that. Bob Harris actually forced him off. It was great. And then finally, the all new, all different X-Men. That was. The best X team of all time, the squad that started to form in Giant Size X-Men number 1, because it was the first major shakeup of the X-Men roster ever.
Was that the one with Storm? No, that's
Yep. It introduced
numerous
characters.
Storm. It was Storm and Colossus and that
and
team.
Nightcrawler. Yep. It was.
I agree that's the best one. I agree that's the best one. I agree X is gold and the blue and gold, right? The blue and the gold team. I agree that those are. I don't agree with the Whedon era. I don't think that belongs above the Quietly era.
Yep.
I don't think the original X-Men should be on that list at all. At all. I might agree that the New Mutants. I'm glad they made the top 10, but I might agree that the New Mutants should be at the top of it, at the 10, because basically that whole comic book was about training X-Men. So
right.
And they never submitted to training, so they were always getting their butts kicked everywhere they went. So, but I mean, I think there's a lot of confirmation bias with the Joss Whedon, that coming so far, so far at the front of the list. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, I think the list is ruined because you put the original team on the list in the first place. You can't have the foundation. That's like ranking the Star Wars movies, right? And I know a lot of people like it. I can understand your favorite versus, but the most important Star Wars movie is Star Wars,
right?
It's just that there's no getting around that. There's no other way to look at that. The most important of anything is the first thing, the thing that brought it into existence in the first place, whether or not it was well done and it needed to be rebooted or redone or whatever.
Right.
The most important episode of Star Trek was, Where No Man Has Gone Before, or The Cage.
No, I disagree with that though, because I think once
it's the first, the proof of concept is the most important thing. It should not be in any kind of ranking. It has to be put to the side.
Though, but it could be. No, it doesn't have to be put to the side. It could be one of the best. It could be the very first episode of Star Trek could be your favorite because it was the best.
That favorites are completely different.
Okay.
As pertains to quality, of which quality is more important than the other. You got to take the original off the list because if you took the original off the list, everything else disappears. That is, of course, the most important. If you remove that from the timeline, nothing's on the timeline. That's absolutely the most important thing.
I think you're getting hung up in semantics, though. This is the best. The best. Now, he has him on the list as number 4. Not the most important.
What is the parameter for best? What's the metric
with so
for
many
best?
mutants to pick and choose from, who is the best X-Men team of all time, is what the article says. It's a question that has plenty of answers.
And you don't think
X-Men.
that the best X-Men team of all time is the first X-Men team because it spawned all other teams?
I don't think
not your favorite, not the most intricate, not the one that expanded the genre beyond.
It spawned it, but what made X-Men popular? There were elements of it in the foundation, but what made X-Men the most popular, you could argue, actually was not in the original iteration, which was the diversity of characters. And I don't even mean that in terms of ethnicity either. I mean just the cool factor. The original X-Men. There's nothing.
You can't measure the cool factor, though.
Oh, I can measure that cool factor.
You can't measure the cool factor as it best or not best. I mean, that's not the parameters of the even the list in and of itself. That's you adding the caveat to it. So I mean, okay, do whatever
There's
you
no
want.
definition of best. It's not most important necessarily.
That's what I'm saying. Do you see what I'm saying? It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
You're the worst with these top 10 lists. You would not work for Games Radar.
I don't. Yeah, because it's useless content. It's useless content.
Let me ask you a question here. This was meaningful. I didn't know this, actually. Many of the characters introduced in Giant Size X-Men were brought over by Cockrum, who scrapped together unused ideas from his Legion of Superhero days to create Nightcrawler and Storm, the first black superheroine to play a major role at Marvel or DC, and who, along with Colossus and massive breakout star Wolverine, became the core of the X-Men roster for decades. Didn't realize that he brought over designs from Legion of Superheroes. I learned something.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Where's X-Force on this list, though? The Liefeld Nicieza.
You said best, right?
It is one of the best. That whole Cannonball storyline. Oh, my God. I hope we see this. All right. We hope you enjoyed our show.
Yeah, what a great show. Another great one in the can.
Well, I thought it was every show we do is great.
Mm-hmm.
Even the first episode is easily the most important of all, and the best one of all of them, because it was just me predicting the day would fall.
Yes,
that was episode 2. Actually,
we all long for those days to come back.
Yes, we do. Please stay safe out there, and we will be back next week. Rogue Wave.